Anyway, so you...
Yeah, and they just let me like hang out in the yard with the convicts before the show, and you know, I spent a half hour or so out there with them, just in general population. And one of the things that that I didn't know until I got in there is they have substance abuse programs behind the wall, taught by state licensed substance abuse counselors. They're all inmates. They're all prisoners. They're all lifers who got certified behind the wall, and most of them never getting out. And so it's really peer to peer. You know what I mean? It's really.
Are there a lot of drugs in prison?
Hell yeah.
So basically, if you want to use, you can use.
Oh
in
yeah,
prison.
it's a hard place not to use.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how many times I went in, and I thought, well, when I get out, I'll get clean.
Because a lot of people argue the best place to put drug addicts is in prison or jail, because that's where they'll get clean. But
right, like that's like the Lindsay Lohan argument. Like, put her in jail, she'll get healthy.
You know what? Actually, it's not an argument. It's actually Felon's statement about, you said the reason why or how you got clean was because they locked you up.
Right. Yeah.
But if you want to find it, you could find it there too.
When I was finally ready to get clean, I don't think I could have done it without a prison cell. You know what I mean? But when I wanted to get high in there, you know, you can get high. But the one thing you don't do is you don't get strung out in there. You might get high and you might use drugs recreationally, but the last thing you want to do is get a habit going in there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You become dependent on some other people.
Yeah, it gets a little dangerous. You know?
So what was the response at San Quentin about to you and your talk to them and your show?
It was good. It was recovery based because September is National Recovery Month. Not all of them are in recovery, of course.
I didn't know that, by the way.
You know what I mean? And so it was, you know, I didn't do a lot of, I just did my stuff. And, you know, which I don't, and my routine isn't, I wouldn't say a big recovery message.
None of ours are, though. I think that's sort of, you know, I mean, although you don't have to be in, you know, recovery to enjoy our show, because none of us, it's not heavy about that. It's
the
just
recovery piece is that we're all in recovery.
Yeah. I mean, I think we touch on it. You might you have like one little bit, you have a little bit, I have a couple jokes.
It depends on the venue,
not,
too.
You know.
You know what I mean?
But it's not. We're not. All our jokes are not about
Speaking of venues,
that.
what are your next shows? Where are you guys going?
On Wednesday we leave. And hopefully I won't be strapped to the top of the car. That's my worry. You guys gonna be nice to me?
It's always the bottom.
Wow.
They're giving you a choice, because in sobriety we do have a choice.
We're driving to. We're doing a show in Portland,
Oregon.
Yeah, and then we're going to San Francisco.
So you guys are driving? This is a driving?
This time.
The West
So
Coast
who are you doing the show with in Portland? Who are you supporting in Portland?
We're doing a show at the Q Center, and we're doing a benefit for Garden of Hope Recovery House for Women. It just opened February 1st. It's a brand new place, and so we're doing it for them, and we're going to be doing some radio time to help promote that. But it's at the Q Center, which is, I don't remember the address, but again, if you just go to laughswithoutliquor.com, you'll find out all the details. The price of the shows are generally the same almost everywhere you go. It's $20. And that we do help out with the people who are in recovery and can't afford it. And that's, like I say, just email us and we'll work something out. So, then we're going to San Francisco.
Yep.
Like we just talked to Big Gay Dave about. And that is a benefit. That's, okay, so March 4th is Portland, Oregon. March 5th is San Francisco. And then we come back to L.A. for a couple days, and then we're off to where, Felon?
Then we go to Atlanta for 3 shows, I believe.
Yeah, 3 shows.
You're flying, though.
Yeah, we're flying to Atlanta. I have a book signing in Atlanta, and then we have 3 shows.
What book?
It's called Laughing on the Inside. The Life and Crimes of Felon OReilly. It's not a comedy. There's some funny stories in it that weren't too funny when they were happening. But, it's
comedy plus time. Tragedy plus time equals comedy.
It's about crime and addiction and recovery.
What would you say, like, about, most convicts? Statistically, I know there's, you don't know but how many people are in jail because they were high or drunk?
Well, I don't know that. That's a tough question to answer. I would say, the national statistics, the government statistics are 85% of people incarcerated have some sort of substance abuse issues. That doesn't necessarily mean or that they're in there because they were high or drunk.
Right.
Like a lot of us are addicted to crime,
Right.
Which for me was even harder to stop than the drugs and booze. You know what I mean? I didn't realize all this till I got into recovery, till I put the drugs and booze down.
That's interesting. So you're saying you actually had a process addiction to committing crimes?
Absolutely.
Like a gambling addict.
I had a prison counselor tell me if I stopped putting drugs and booze in my system, I would figure out what it is I really love to do in life. And that's exactly what happened. And what I figured out I'd love to do is steal stuff.
I'm checking my wallet here.
But it affects the same part of our brain.
Right.
Right.
That whole adrenaline thing. You know what I mean? And now they're starting to look at it now. And, there's certain adolescents, predominantly males, not exclusively, and they call them T-types. And it stands for thrill seekers.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing if it's harnessed. If you come from, from a decent home and you have some parental guidance, it's not. People become skydivers and snowboarders and policemen and
all
firemen,
that stuff. Yeah.
Right.
chasing that adrenaline. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
I think there's also a healthy medium between the extreme sports
But if you come from poverty, usually the only way to get that, to satisfy that, is through crime. That's the easiest and quickest way to get it, and that's where a lot of us go.
So how old were you when you really considered getting sober?
37.
37.
It took me, from the time I decided I wanted to get clean and sober until I did, I think it took me about 8 years.
And after you got sober, you were still actively doing felony type acts?
I would go sit in meetings and then I'd go out and do crime.
Really?
And I was the most spiritual armed robber you ever met.
Did you have any insight into this when this was going on? I mean, were you contemplating, like, am I, I'm sober, but I'm supposed to be,
I didn't want to, I'd been a criminal my whole life. This was a career choice I made long before I stumbled into drugs and booze.
Right.
And so I wanted to get clean and sober, but continue to do crime. And I found that I couldn't after repeatedly failing. I found that I had to give all three of them up. And, which a lot of people come in and have to make career changes to get clean and sober.
Yeah.
Well, was your family, what was your family like?
Well, I came from a big Irish family, 4 fathers.
That's the first time I heard that.
My mother and father never drank, ever.
Right.
And
same here.
And my brother and sisters, they never drank, And so
that's interesting.
And so, of course, I blamed my parents.
Me too.
Then somebody pointed out that I had a brother and sister that didn't live anything like I did. So then I realized, well, then that means they did it on purpose. They raised them two right and raised me wrong.
So everyone's fault but yours.
Of course.
All right.
And the number here is 877-8830-830, 877-8830-830 if you'd like to talk to any of our guests and ask Felon or
Ian
and Amy and
I think I just want to say, I think that what's really fascinating about us three is that we kind of cover the gamut of all the people who and the reasons often why people use, like people, places, and things and all that kind of stuff. But I think I know that Felon gets people coming up to him after shows saying, I can totally relate to that. And I remember this story of one of the good stories that we were in Portland, Maine, my hometown, and we drug Amy with us to Maine to do this show in the freezing cold
in a church which Jews love, and
in an Irish Catholic church in the Irish Heritage Center. But something really beautiful came out of that afterwards.
True,
it was really cool.
True.
Will you tell that story?
Yeah. Well, I talk a lot about depression and suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, overdoses, that kind of stuff, and medication and that kind of. And it's tough to talk about that stuff on stage. It's embarrassing, but I really want to break the stigma, and it helps free me of my shame. I dare myself to talk about it, and then how can you be ashamed of it? But also, if it can help one other person, And this kid came up to me after, and he said, I was in the psych ward too, and I tried to commit suicide, and I was so ashamed about it, but you made it so funny. he said, I feel so much better about it. Thank you. And my heart just melted. And I was like, thank you. That's better than all the applause ever. You know, that just one person feels emancipated by what you're talking about and doesn't feel alone. And for me, that, you know, talking about humor, I mean, if I can't laugh at some of the stuff that I went through, shooting coke, and now that I have epilepsy from meth and all my depressive episodes and all that stuff, it's like the shame will just make me get loaded again. I have to make it into something productive, you know, and funny and serviceable to other people. For sure.
Absolutely. Felon, do you have stories like that too? Like people come up to you? I know people come up to you.
No.
I mean besides the ladies.
Yeah, guys, we're gonna hop out for another break.
Please.
on the ladies before Felon ends up back in jail. Come back. It's KLEAN Radio. Welcome back to KLEAN Radio. This is Andrew and my co-host Judah once again.
I love that song.
That's great. And tonight we have Laughs Without Liquor, a comedy troupe composed of Ian Harvie, Felon OReilly, and Amy Dresner. And we've been talking about, when we left for the break, we were talking about different reasons that people end up using.
And I also just the upside of, I think I know Felon has stories of, you know, after you get done with a show and you've made a bunch of people laugh, someone comes up and tells you this amazing kind of raw story of how you made them feel better about something.
You've made them, and also they just share something with you because you've been vulnerable on stage. I mean, even though it's like I remember once talking about just epilepsy on stage, and this was in a normal club, and another comic said to me, "I never thought epilepsy." She goes, "I have epilepsy, and I've never talked about it." She said, "Because I never thought it was funny." She said, but you made it really funny. I mean, to me, I love to take the darkest stuff and make it funny.
Well, I think that each of us have something very raw and honest. Like Felon talks about stuff. I mean, there's such a stigma around, you know, being a convict that people don't want to talk about, and that people are fearful of people who are convicts. You know, people instantly are. There's this, you know, this sucking in of like this, you know, inside, whether they do it out loud or not.
Yeah.
And you know, the same with anybody who is an addict, or you say crystal meth or mental illness, or if you say trans or transgender or tranny or whatever it is. Like we all have these sort of, I think, instant effects that people have preconceived ideas about, and that I think we just tear all that down.
Felon, how long have you had the name Felon?
Since I started doing comedy. When I first started doing comedy, I still had warrants. So I had to have a stage name.
Didn't want to fill out a 1099 with a real name on it.
But I do, you know, being from Boston and Boston Irish, you know, a lot of my comedy is about that, about being Irish. And so I had a buddy of mine who didn't think my real last name was people that weren't Irish wouldn't know it was Irish. So I came up with the O'Reilly, and then he was like, "Yeah, that's good. You just need a first name." And so and then that night about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was like, "Felon O'Reilly," and so that's how it worked. And I write under that name too.
All good. You know, it's funny, when I got sober, I used to hear this guy say, his name is Chris Campbell, and he used to say, you know, if it's after 11 o'clock at night and it sounds like a good idea, don't do it.
Right.
And I'm always curious. I always love to go into prison and find out when the ideas came. Because you really don't think about bank robbery at 8 o'clock at night, do you?
I would think about 24 hours a day.
Okay, there goes that theory.
I've written some of my best jokes dozing off to sleep.
Absolutely, that's so true. And if you don't write them down, you're like, "Oh, I'll remember in the morning," and they're gone.
Or worse, like you write them on the eraser board next to your bed that you have, and you wake up and you wrote 3 words that you have no clue what they mean.
You're like, what?
Yeah.